Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Munro Live podcast. I'm Kevin Hardy. For those of you just joining us, Munro is a company that does, lean design for manufacturing, and kind of helps a lot of our customers with new product development. And joining me today is Jake Hawksworth. So he's the CEO and co-founder of Hypercraft, a company that is, I would argue, initially very much into high performance, EV, conversions, and kind of has shifted dramatically, here in recent years to essentially like a much broader EV portfolio. And that's kind of what I wanted to start out with, is just what drove that transformation from, king of hammers to where you're kind of getting into now with industries like, like maritime, for instance.
Yeah, awesome. First of all, super grateful to be joining you. Really excited to cover kind of a list of topics, starting with this one. So I would start off and say, for us, just like many that enter kind of this world of EV, you just go in knowing that you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to test a lot of assumptions that you're making about the industry, about the market, about the technology. And, we always kind of had a mindset from the very beginning of like, being really excited, but also being flexible, right? It's like, there was like going in rigid with a very specific, focused, like, this is what we're going to do and this is what's going to work. Kind of carried that kind of like solution looking for a problem mentality, and we didn't want to have that. We wanted to just kind of go test the waters, and we did that. And a lot of people, there's some things that were very public, but I think, like, even for us, at times felt a little bit of criticism over like how diverse we were, in the beginning with a lot of things, and there are core strategies that we've stuck to very closely over the last, since like early 2019. But a lot of people don't understand that Hypercraft actually started at the vehicle development level, and kind of shifted into powertrain technology as a primary focus, and then just really understanding where we fit in, and what was a good fit and what we're really passionate about. So it's been exciting, and there's definitely some new things we're getting into that got us pretty jazzed.
So one thing that was like interesting to me when I went to your website, I look at like the product portfolio that you have. So there is like a whole series of pairings that you have for drive models, inverters, and some things seem very like plug and play, right? With some modules and controls that you have. And then you look at some of the gearboxes, and clearly in some ways very bespoke in their arrangement. And I guess in your words, when I see this, how broad I think that the portfolio is, like, what would you say, from a technology perspective, like, is driving kind of Hypercraft forward? When you look at the everything that you kind of do offer, and we'll cut in some footage here of some of the drivetrain and powertrain, offerings. It's pretty wide, spectrum, but also seems very tailored based off of what category of product you're looking at, whether you're retrofitting into an existing platform or something like that.
Yeah, it was kind of like this balance that we've been searching for a long time, because what the thing that we had been used to, and my background is really kind of at the vehicle level with chassis, suspension, vehicle dynamics, and everything, as well as a lot of different accessory components that go into different types of vehicles, performance vehicles. But like, we had internal combustion, for 120 years, and over the last 40 years, we've gotten into hybrid and some electric, the early electric, and everything. But from a product perspective, one of the things that we believed was, if there's going to be greater access to the products and technology, we have to figure out how to standardize the product line, because, like, doing everything bespoke was going to be very difficult to scale in any type of capacity, whether it was in the way that the products were manufactured and integrated into vehicle platforms, or the variety of different vehicle platforms that could accept this type of new technology. We had to look. We had to have a product line perspective from day one, and that's what we did. And that's kind of my background, is really developing product lines within brands that, how do they fit into the market, and how do they kind of serve market needs. So I would say that there is a huge amount of diversity, but there's also a lot of strategy behind it. And the key word is configurability, right? It's like, from the technology perspective, is how can we, we're going from internal combustion, which is a mechanical machine that's a very integrated machine, um, and it's centralized into one spot on the vehicle primarily. If you separate driveline out, but powertrain specifically is always located in one spot. Where with electrification, it's kind of distributed. The hardware is very distributed. So we look at the architecture, we look at all the components that live within these systems, and we say, we kind of said, how do we leverage software development? How do we leverage, the electrical engineering, the system engineering, and all the hardware components, whether it's the ESS, the battery systems, and the charging systems, and all this. But how do we make it flexible enough for a lot of, the kind of these specialized higher performance vehicle, whether they're vehicle OEMs, manufacturing in medium to, to low volumes, or they're, motorsport applications with race teams doing development. How do we make it easy for them to understand it and integrate it? And so this plug and play for EV is kind of a false narrative. There's really no true plug and play. There's something about it that has to be, engineer designed for that vehicle. But could we get to 80% of it being, a standardized architecture with hardware components that were very configurable? And that's the approach we took.
And when I made the comment, like it seemed very broad. One of the things that was interesting, because like a lot of the housings appear to be machined, right? Which give you a ton of flexibility, especially if all your core components, the differentials, your gears are common, right? And we're there, and maybe I don't want to speak for you, but when you were talking and explaining kind of your approach to your products, that started where I started to think of like your high investment areas, right? With the motors are all common. But when I started flipping through, not physically, but like going through the pages and seeing that essentially, if I wanted an offset gearbox and where I wanted it, you could tailor it. But I would imagine where in relation to the drive module and the gear set are for a particular application, you can tailor that, right? And if your investment is in a 6-axis CNC machine or a series of them, you could do a certain amount of volume relatively easily to suit a customer's needs, where all your core, arguably very expensive components, you've tried to standardize across the.
Yeah, we absolutely have. And I think, to your point, kind of the drive line is always the connection between powertrain and the vehicle, right? And so that's where most of the customization or the specific development happens for each vehicle platform. And there's some things that start to become a pattern or repeatable from one vehicle to another. But we also kind of looked at, as a company, to have a high impact in short period of time. What are the problems that we're best at solving, or what are the problems that maybe there's already companies or partners that we can partner with. And I like can't stress enough how important partnerships are at this time in the industry. Leveraging the strengths, and we have incredible partners. We have partners in motors and inverters, and we have partners in some of the driveline components and everything. I think our internal focus on development and manufacturing has been around high power electronics, power management, the batteries, the high voltage battery systems, and we put a lot of time into the modularity of our battery systems, so that we could support different voltage architectures, that we could support different performance requirements, and as well as capacities, right? With something that was as off the shelf as we can make it. And so the rest of it, there's so many companies that are involved, besides Hypercraft, to make it all happen, and we wouldn't be here without them. There are companies like Cascadia Motion and Dana, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's huge.
When you speak like to the partnership aspects, is there an example that maybe you could provide, that walk through, like maybe let's say a problem set that you were given, and then at a high level, the solution that you arrived at to meet that problem set? Is there an example maybe you can share, whether it's an existing product that you kind of already show out there publicly, or?
Yeah. I mean, some of the fun, exciting ones are always the ones that you can't really talk about. But one of the greatest partnerships that we ever made, that still has a strong foundation, even though I think there's been a lot of evolution on our side, and a lot of things that we're doing to kind of move beyond some of the early years. But AEM was a huge partner of ours in the very beginning, where we we've never wanted to reinvent the wheel on anything, and I think it's always challenging to to come to market with something and establish your value proposition. Like, what are we doing that's solving problems? And so when you start partnering with companies, you know, um, it's it's always a challenge to say this is the value they bring and this is the value we bring and this is why we're working together. But it was always supernatural, very natural in the sense of that relationship with AEM. And Kirk Miller, was there at the time, and early years when we met and connected on the vision for the market and everything. And so the problem set there was really around how we looked at control electronics and software, and you know um, in the concept of how do we start to standardize, and how do we look at safety? I mean, safety is always the number one thing, especially when you're in the world of specialized vehicles, low volume, or even the one-offs. That's where safety is the hardest to achieve, because in an OEM, a high volume OEM program, or like, we, the between Munro and us, like we understand defense type things, and so we know what it looks like when you're involved in a program that ground up. You can look at every critical aspect of the program, the technology, the hardware, all of that. But when you want to support a 67 or 68 Mustang Fastback with 1,000 horsepower electric powertrain, some of the solutions on the market are really challenging from a safety perspective. And so, there's just so much good that has come from those types of partnerships and problem solving things together.
And when you say safety, are we talking more like functional electronics safety, like the overall capabilities, like how far you can push inverters and things of that nature? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's very holistic. So I think there's fundamental safety systems within the high voltage powertrain, that I think are hard to achieve well. So like your high voltage interlock or your isolation monitoring, and to have isolation monitoring, integrated into a powertrain, but to use it effectively takes pretty advanced electronic software and controls, logic, right?
right,
And so, how do we do this well? And then it goes into also the engineering integration at the hardware level of was the OBC and the level 3 charging, and the high power distribution, so high voltage junction box or your high voltage power distribution unit, to the battery packs and the whole ESS system, was every part of it designed and engineered to really work together the right way, and then integrate into a motor inverter where the power that's being delivered and how it's being delivered and controlled, and all the settings within the inverter motor system are set and calibrated right. This, to your point, like that's where a lot of this safety is, and that's what keeps people safe. And then there's a lot of fundamentals too on safety when it comes to integrating the hardware into the vehicle and doing that right. And we really want to keep people safe, because I think when we keep people safe and there aren't the bad things happening, it's healthy. Um, it goes south really fast when the safety is compromised, and we have a huge passion for motorsport. And when you're pushing the performance limits and you're doing it like we, with Sierra Car as a customer and partner, we did the Sierra Car open wheel, race up Pikes Peak with Lucy Block last year. And, it was like when you're there in the moment, you feel the weight of everything you've done up to that point to keep Lucy Block safe going all the way to the top of Pikes Peak. And what's on the line and the risk to an individual, in those moments is, it's pretty heavy stuff. So, we want to do it right. No cutting corners. And Munro has that same mentality. So I think, you guys understand it at a very fundamental level.
yeah, what's interesting to me is like one of the things I think is very cool about power sports and motorsports just in general is, of all the activities like that humans engage in, it's like it's a natural way to challenge like competitive drive and innovation in a manner that like trickles out, um, and you can glean a lot from it from various industries, which is why a lot of these big OEMs have race programs, and try to draw them whenever they can. And I think one of the things that's very, very interesting is I think the problem set that a regular OEM has is maybe a little bit different because their operating parameters are much different than a motorsports like capacity, especially for something like as violent as King of Hammers is, right? For instance, or even going up, Pikes Peak. You're talking about considerations, and for some of our customers, we're going through this right now with a whole series of things. They do X, Y, and Z with their vehicle, and their vehicle is in a very, very specific. I can't go into too much detail because it'll tell everybody who it is, but a very, very specific like operating conditions, right? There's not many people in that space, and they pay a lot of money to operate at that level, right? Because that has to be a vehicle that performs in this performance capacity in a manner that they want to be essentially segment leading. And then it also has to be a road going legal that, NHTSA is compliant with all the NHTSA regulations, third-party regulations like IIHS and things of that nature. So it's very, very interesting to see how much emphasis architecturally is placed on certain things where you're placing modules or placing various parts of the vehicle and protecting for other systems, therein of, right? And I can only imagine for you, just like from a thermal management perspective of what these vehicles are being asked to do. It's kind of, there really is nothing else like it, right? And thermal management essentially limits a lot of EVs potentials, especially production EV potential, where they can be significantly uncorked if you really wanted to get down to. But from a safety perspective, you just simply can't, because you can't manage like the waste heat for these inverter systems and things of that nature.
You can. I mean, sometimes I get asked, the question of, what's the hardest, most complex part of what we do, and thermal management is it. Thermal management is kind of the core of really, optimizing, whether it's performance or efficiency or anything. That's really kind of where the gold is. And but the motorsport thing's always been interesting to us, and I would say that the adoption, the transition to new technologies around hybrid or electric, so many of the large OEMs have been focused on consumer vehicle applications, and they really haven't had the room. They've been hyper focused on what do these, what's the use case, what do these products need to do, what's the performance, everything. And so you see these really hard limits where there's kind of like this teasing of performance, and you feel the acceleration and everything. But then when you put it in a motorsport application, they fall on their face because they were never designed for that. And so we've missed the grassroots kind of adoption of electrification. And so one of the kind of missions of Hypercraft from the very beginning, which you see some early work in motorsports, was to as we developed product and technologies to continue to support the motorsport industry with access to it. And in the way, like, we want to get it in the hands of the builders, the creatives, the the fabricators, those that are kind of excited about pushing the cutting edge, and we're learning so much with them. Like Scalar, which is a Canadian company that we did the Toyota GR86 program with. I just talked to them yesterday, and they're running lap times over a second faster than a 911. You know, um, I think it was the GT4 RS.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like a NASA GT2 class. They're running
Right.
faster times in a GR86 than that car. And we're starting. We're learning a lot. We learn a lot in motorsport. We learn a lot with also what the motorsport community needs to be interested in electrification, because that's the other part of this is we've had so much kind of like pushing on the rope with
Right.
electric that we want people to be excited about what it's capable of, and learning with it as well. And so this is a cool space. We're pumped.
So in your mind, let's say from like a motorsports perspective, look, what do they? I have an idea of maybe where it will go, but like the need, right? And what did what is the input that you're getting, or the asks to drive maybe the adoption further, or to push the boundaries a little bit farther than currently, right?
Yeah, I would, it's kind of a funny thing because the drive to win is kind of the core DNA. Like what I love about motorsport is that they're technology agnostic, and that's why so much innovation happens.
Sure.
Because like as soon as I mean, you know, I mean, if somebody came up with a way you know, to do something with hydrogen tomorrow in a motorsport app, like we don't really care what
Sure.
the true technology is, and so it's really always been the ask has always been about understanding how to apply it the right way in the right application. And so that's where like our partnership with Sierra Car and Nitrocross in close course rallycross racing, with the Sierra Car platform for the 24-25 season is huge because it's such a perfect use case for electric powertrain. The driving experience is amazing. So we've leveraged it like hill climb racing. There's so many different applications, but I think the idea, my perception is the motorsport community is like, we're not going to have electrification shoved down our throat and told that everything that we're doing has to be electric, right? Because there's a lot of places where it doesn't fit. I mean, we've loved the concept, and we've even put out some information on development that we're doing for the Baja 1000, right? Like we'd love to see a real engineered solution for the Baja 1000, and we believe there's a path to it. But that is a very challenging application. Like there's no way you enter that in year 1, year 2, probably even year 5, and are going to compete with the existing technology. It's a long path. But there are like the more conversations that we have, we've learned that the ask is really about, is it Formula Drift? Is it, rallycross or closed course racing or hill climb racing? Or, is there a class in NASA? Or are some of the off-road racing organizations willing to put in short course racing for electric, like King of the Hammers is, to do a short course race where it's much more technical, but then electric really shines because the power management, the torque, the traction control systems, are so much more advanced when you get into the world of electric, and then people get excited. So the organic adoption is really important to us, you know, um, and we're pretty patient. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I think the organic adoption is very important. The last person I talked to here was I like to say a good acquaintance of mine, Dave Tracy, and we kind of were talking about, at that time there's lots of recourse about the cold snap. You're seeing just all across the board, you know, not just Detroit, right? Like many of your conventional OEMs are like have cut back on volume, or cutting prices. There's a whole, like essentially whiplash effect. And my personal opinion on it is essentially we were not letting things happen naturally, and we were forcing a lot of policies that didn't make sense in the market, and eventually that would catch up with you, right? Where because the money never lies, right? In some ways, right? Like everything comes down to the almighty dollar in many ways, of how much is it going to cost? How much can I sell this for? How much profit is there in this? And is there going to be problems, whether it's warranty on the backside? There's all these things. And a lot of it comes down to just essentially just time and money. Right. Um, and I think it's actually very refreshing to hear that, we'll see where it kind of takes us, because I think there's definitely areas that it does make sense, like the hill climbs and things of that nature are well suited, towards that. And then, you could argue maybe in the conversations that are happening now, right? The Cybertruck, falling short of range estimations, different things like that. You might be able to essentially pull capacity out because you're running hot laps and you're targeting essentially everything about that performance to a particular racing series. And I don't need to have, 80 kilowatt hours. I can have 10. right? Because I'm doing hot laps. I can have a very light car that makes a lot of power very quickly. And then I can plug it in and charge it fast, very quickly, right? Back up for another lap. So it's kind of interesting to see that you're naturally scoping this based off of problem sets and where your solutions may fit, right? And I think in many ways, a lot of other people have gotten in trouble not doing that. So
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I think I think it's a very important part of it. Which is just what are the expectations that we build around what we're trying to achieve, and ultimately, what we're trying to achieve is positive impact, right? And we've always believed that the advancement of technology, just as a big idea, an aspirational idea of the advancement of technology and innovation always leads to a better future, right? And what is that better future that we envision? A cleaner environment. Getting like one of the better futures that we envision is kind of the younger generations being involved and passionate with mobility and transportation and motorsport. So how are the 10-year-olds and the 15-year-olds and the 20-year-olds, how are they getting involved, and what's important to them is what, I mean, I'm close to 40, and I remember rebuilding engines with my dad in the garage, in middle school and high school, and that 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 laid a foundation for so many things that I'm passionate about. But it's not always going to be the same experience. Like, we can't hold on. We can't always hold on. We have, this passion for education, and we have, this passion for the younger generations on that side of it. So there's there's so much good, and there's so much for us to be excited about and lean into. And we kind of block out the negativity around the media because our expectations are probably a little bit different. We believed there would be a pendulum swing, to your point, like the pendulum swung heavy, but I mean, we look at everything over the last couple hundred years and see that every type of disruption that's ever happened in any industry, there's pendulum swings, and so if we're prepared for it and we're not caught off guard, I think the media is, always going to try to overhype, and there's, and everything, but we, we have a lot going in hybrid development, because we're really excited about many applications that fall outside of completely leveraging BEV, but can benefit from something that's still a very win-win situation with hybrid. And Cummins just released an engine platform that burns hydrogen. It's a multi-fuel platform, diesel, sustainable fuels, hydrogen, all in one engine platform. This future where hydrogen infrastructure comes in play, and we can leverage hydrogen burning internal combustion, which is still a zero emission vehicle technology, with electrification. There's just, I mean, man, we look out 10, 15, 20 years, and it's an exciting future in mobility and mobility tech. And so we're like, let's go. We can be super patient,
sure.
and understanding, and set reasonable expectations for what's happening now.
Yeah, the hydrogen thing is always interesting. Many years ago, I want to say the article is like the Mechanical Messiah or something like that, but some guy had built an H1 Hummer, I want to say, with a newer Duramax, and it was running a blend of biodiesel and hydrogen, if I remember correctly. And we thought it was cool, like my buddy. And this is a long time ago. Because and it made like 1,000 horsepower, 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, and they took it to a California emissions, and it just because of the way that the hydrogen binds with the carbon, it burns extremely clean, And a friend of mine did it. We had a welder tank, bought some hydrogen. We essentially just added hydrogen to his Explorer until the RPMs kicked up, then backed off. And literally, we just drove around with this tube of hydrogen into his vacuum line on his intake manifold with an acetylene torch. And we're driving it around. Eventually, you have to control spark a little bit more carefully running off hydrogen. We ended up blowing apart the intake manifold when it backfired, but it was pretty neat. We did that for my truck as well. I had an old Ranger at the time. And it was really interesting to see from, I lived in Pennsylvania and we had emissions, and the thing would error out, right? So I don't know. It's a conversation we have here a lot with the hybrids. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about it, because I think there's some interesting, use cases. And here, when we look at, we're obviously very cost centric, and where that pendulum is at, when you start aligning various major systems in a vehicle, for us, one of the levers that we always can pull is volume, right? And right now, battery, and I'd like to know, well, I'll ask that separately, but as I kind of lay this out, that pendulum is still coming. The battery costs are coming down. And then I think as production changes, and maybe this is a little different on the aftermarket, this is the kind of question I'd like to ask, but it's very interesting for us to see when the point for like hybrids, right? They may make a lot of sense for cost aversion due to battery costs because of the material price being relatively high. But where you get to the point where having two powertrains and the volume associated with maybe certain components, whether it's the internal combustion engine or the transmission, starts to come down to a point where they become a little bit more cost prohibitive, kind of like the batteries are right now, right? We're hovering, I think, at $130 kilowatt hour roughly to the pack, but once that drops to like 120, 115, 110, especially under the fabled like $100 to the pack level, you would see, and then like a bill of material lineup, that PHEVs don't make a ton of cost sense anymore, right? Where it's energy resilience. And I think it becomes more of a, like an operational need, which I think is very interesting about everything you kind of talked about. Letting your customer, the use space, decide on what I need or what we're trying to drive and what goals we're trying to achieve, right? I think it's kind of interesting. And I don't know what's your take on maybe what I just said, and then I have a couple questions, but go ahead. So,
Well, I think you really zeroed in on something that's very, very important. And I feel like with all of the, and I don't want this to come across wrong, but all the kind of hype around everything, we've almost lost sight of is, what are the consumer's needs? Like, or, who's the customer and what are their needs? What are they trying to achieve? What's important to them? What are the features that are important? What's the consumer experience that's important? Like, as somebody who's really, focused a career on, product development and product market fit and aligning the value of a product or service to, that price. And to your point, like that is such a critical relationship because people buy on value. And, with just kind of everything around like, oh, we're going this direction and we're going to use, everything's going to be EV or everything's going to be this, or all these opinions, we kind of lost sight of, well, what does the consumer want? And if we can start there, if we can ask that question, you know, what we now have is a portfolio of powertrain technology that we've never had before to leverage, where we can say, oh, there's internal combustion systems that, in the future will have really amazing sustainable fuels and different fuel technologies around internal combustion. And then we also have hybrid. And there's this massive array of hybrid. Like hybrid is complex, which is always kind of the big concern that we've always had. But the beauty of hybrid is there's series and parallel hybrid, and there's all these different ways to integrate it into a vehicle platform. And then, there's hydrogen electric, and there's internal combustion and electric, and there's, it's like almost endless. And then you have BEV, which is also, in some ways kind of one of the most pure new consumer experiences you can possibly have, that align with where we see mobility tech going. But either way, you have this portfolio to work with. And it's like there is an amazing solution for any mobility application now. And I think if we view the future 10, 15, 20 years out as a mix, not one dominant powertrain technology, but a mix of many different good options, I think you'll start to see the industry around transportation start to support that and start to have the right conversations. And we're trying to have them right now, from that perspective. So I think it was a great point that you brought up, and that's how we feel about it. But hybrid's challenging. I mean, the control systems, the software, the integration, combining, like doing a really good combination between two powertrain technologies is really tough, right? So.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I mean, there's in some ways they're so different. Like the mechanical aspect of I have a camshaft and a profile that is mechanically governed. Unless you were to separate, I mean, there are engines that essentially have electropneumatically or solenoid controlled valves and things like that, where they're completely disassociated from the actual combustion cycle, where you can play a lot around with timing, if you will. But it's pretty interesting. So from your space and in this area of essentially, we'll say like lower volumes and things like that, or very target centric, like powertrain applications, do you see like how much does battery cost and things of that nature? Like, what are your major limits? And then when you have these portfolios and you have all these levers that you have for various things, at your level, do you see kind of what I was referring to, where this imbalance in cost, or right now, is it because the volumes are typically low, it's relatively, I don't want to say cost agnostic, but it's not as crucial because of the volumes.
Yeah, it definitely drives us to align, our business with applications that are less price sensitive, because, we from a cost down perspective, and I think as Munro, this is actually, kind of a cool conversation is, there's two like on cost down is like, how do we reduce the price to the market of this? There's kind of two things. One is the scale up. You mentioned that before. Um, the other thing is through innovation, and, how are there ways to design things, components within the system for manufacturing, or are there ways to look for new innovation in technology, and like specific, just to get a little bit more targeted for us, using software to optimize hardware is something that the IoT kind of computing consumer electronics industry has done really, really well. And so we look at those, like for us as a company, because we are lower volume, and we'll, maybe someday we'll have the volumes, up in around, where some of the larger OEMs are. But that's not foreseeable within the next 15 to 20 years. And so, we have to leverage innovation a lot more, and then also look for applications that are less price sensitive. And so, for us, parts, and it's segments within verticals, right? Like you take the marine vertical, and you say, what are the specific segments where, the technology, our product aligns, our capacity as a business, and you know, there's not as much price sensitivity. Either we can compete more directly with what they're already buying, or the consumer is so interested in this new consumer experience or some benefit that they get from it that they're willing to pay a premium. And it takes, it's a lot of conversations to get there for us. And defense is a space that we're doing really well. And then motorsport, I mean, you find where you can compete at a performance level, and people will pay a premium for it. So that's huge as well.
When you say performance level, one thing I'm kind of curious is, operating costs are kind of like one of the big advantages sometimes with electrification, just EVs in general, more specifically BEVs, right? Do you see that like with power sports? Because with fuel consumption and just if you were to, you have two books for race teams, two Excel sheets, right? All right, here's one that we have this, an electrified, whether BEV or hybrid, um, you know, uh, um, race car versus an ICE, and then you just look at continual expenditures of where we're spending our money at fuel, maintenance, oil changes, rebuilds. How does that kind of shaking out? There's lots of people have opinions about this. I'm just kind of curious, like when money talks, right, and it's driving racing
Yeah.
decisions, how does that actually like hash out from people that are doing it?
Well, it's always an interesting one to me, because it like there is a lot to leverage there. I mean, we've already seen, examples of where our powertrain technology has gone in, and we have real data around, the maintenance costs, the operational costs of a vehicle platform, operating at that performance level. where, I mean, that could be like every 2 or 3 races, there's a $50,000 engine rebuild, right? And you're not, I mean, you could go 2 racing seasons without even, doing a single thing to an electric powertrain. And so, you know, did you just save three or $400,000, over a 2-year period of time? But the industry doesn't think that way yet, and one of the toughest things about new technologies or disruption or new ideas is the education piece.
Hmm.
We have to spend enough time, and we have to be patient enough, which I think is always a lacking thing. Is the patience part of it? Is like you know, there's a great saying. You overestimate what you can accomplish in 1 year, and you underestimate what you can accomplish in 5. Right? Like that's kind of just this ideology around, and we've kind of done that with electrification. We just have overestimated how much time it takes to educate and get that organic adoption and rolling. But I think it will happen. There's a lot of benefits to leverage there. There's a lot around, not, maintenance is kind of a twofold idea. It's not just the costs of it. It's also, the kind of technical side of, who can do it. If you have to do all this maintenance, like, are we going to democratize performance in a way because, women are less intimidated to get into motorsports because they don't have to pull out an engine and rebuild it, or if something in the engine breaks, they, is there something about it, for, like, we talked a lot about the younger generation. Is there something about electrification that also opens up, from a maintenance perspective, or the operational costs or the challenges around that in the motorsport performance world? Are we making it easier for new people to get involved that have never wanted to for some reason? And we love those conversations.
So, and you mentioned this earlier, and I put it away for later because I really wanted to talk about it, about safety, right? And about the connections and things of that nature. So, do you see, like, with the levels of effort that you guys have done so far with increasing safety from the interconnects, from service, from manufacturing, things of that nature, like on the hot rod side of things, do you think, like, your kids will be able to, because there's, like, more specifically what you're pursuing, less so than maybe like the big OEMs, with being able to retrofit or package some of these powertrains elsewhere? Do you think we'll get to that point really where, I shouldn't say really, but where it's no different than, like, hey, we're going to swap a cam this weekend, and we're going to do this, where people are not as intimidated? Because I find in some ways a lot of my friends are just your old traditional motorheads. They're interested in EVs, battery costs aside, and it's all battery management, high voltage, building essentially a high voltage architecture into your K5 Blazer, whatever you're trying to hamstring this thing into. For a lot of these people is, it seems like as a almost unstoppable barrier to them. Maybe not the case for the generation that's kind of coming up. But I keyed in on that earlier, and I felt like, based off friends of mine who are interested in it, just haven't done it for cost or just other reasons, they'd rather put money elsewhere, because they don't see a great option to, essentially, whether you're taking a crash Model Y and trying to get it just moving, to get these high voltage systems talking, the battery management, taking charge, or any of that, right? So,
I mean, I think I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for a lot of the people in the companies that have kind of supported the early DIY community. We kind of stand on their shoulders in a way because, without that basic interest, taking Tesla components, and, we Stealth EV is a Hypercraft brand now, as an example of, like, selling into the DIY market and selling Tesla parts and components. And so we do participate in that world to a degree. But, for me, I would like, we build a high level of intelligence into our systems. And, when we design, and we can provide an off the shelf high voltage junction box, or high voltage power management unit, that has all the integrated safety systems and everything. People, why teach how to build the internals of that if we can make it a standardized product and somebody can plug in and it's already has HVIL? So, if a connector comes loose, the system knows, or all of that. And I think what's really cool, and obviously we'd love to show you this, but like we can take all of our off the shelf parts and components, the battery systems, the high voltage junction boxes, the motors, and everything, and we can do a plug and play system outside of a vehicle that functions and works. And it's really just about wire lengths or high
Sure.
voltage
Yeah.
cable lengths. And so yes, there's still a little like how do you build a really high quality high voltage cable? There's a little bit of learning to do that, but we've taken, from a system level, at an architecture level, we've taken all those questions away. And I think that should be the starting point, right? Because we can, if we build trust and confidence and this idea of safety as a foundation, then there's plenty of time, to innovate and advance and learn, and for people to do more complex things. But starting with a good foundation is important to us, and that happens at the hardware level, the product level, the way the system is designed. And we'd love for less people to be intimidated, and not that there's not a lot to be intimidated about, because if you're driving a vehicle that doesn't have isolation monitoring integrated into the system, or what we've seen where there's modules, high voltage modules that are connected together, in series and placed in different parts of the vehicle, where there's not true safety systems or enclosures built around these things. You can have a variety of dangerous scenarios happen, and people should understand those risks, and they shouldn't take them lightly. I mean, I've seen some things where I don't even want to get close to the vehicle, right?
Sure.
And I'm sure you guys have too. So I think it's not about being critical, and it's about saying, hey, this is where we started, but we can do better, and
Right.
as a company and a team, we can be a part of that. And there's other people that are a part of it too, other companies and everything, but we're excited to be one of them.
Interesting. And I'm curious, when you have like these junction boxes, and because you said something earlier, again, another thing I found interesting was not trying to reinvent the wheel, but then we want to push boundaries. I'm kind of curious. Is there areas when you go through various, either like electrical architecture, powertrain, where you're like, obviously a gear set is a gear set, and we don't need to change anything, but where do you look, right, for the innovation, and where do you stave away? Because I know what we do here, and I kind of joke about it all the time. People are like, oh, we don't like fasteners. We like integration. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, serviceability, things of that nature, crash, whatever you're trying to do. But there's things, like I always joke with some of our customers. I'm like, if you have like 3 layers of material, and one of them you can't even see as a customer, and it doesn't actually function, like we're going to beat you up on it, because it, like, that substrate serves honestly no real purpose. Why are we talking about this? Let's go straight to the component, the structure, and then whatever the customer sees they have. So it's one thing you mentioned, and I'm kind of curious about it, and then maybe how that plays and roll with the products that you offer. So
Yeah, I mean, we have some really exciting products coming to market over the next 2 years that that where we've really zeroed in as a company, where we feel like we can make the most impact, from an innovation perspective, right? And I will, without the ability to go into any details, but I would say, it's within the world of power management and intelligent processing for the vehicle platform. And
okay.
and vehicle networking is really important. The net, it's like, the ideology of systems has been elevated to networking when it comes to mobility tech. And there's a world, where we participate, kind of in these, more individual projects or different things. But, there's also a world that we participate that's more, whether, in the larger scale, larger volume, where we're driving a consumer experience. And we've said, there's so many amazing companies doing innovation in parts of the motor inverter, and areas of even battery and battery design. Like we have our own designs around modular high voltage battery systems that we're very proud of as a team. But long term, where can we make the biggest impact? And I think, it's really kind of in that power management and processing side and in the software side of things. And then how that kind of forms the foundation for the entire powertrain system and vehicle network, right? And so
Gotcha.
it's and then bringing that to a 1967 fastback Mustang.
Sure. Yeah.
Just is just so exciting.
So have you, like, when you say like BMS, one of the things I and selfishly, right, because we have a lot of high voltage batteries here, and then unfortunately, from risk perspective, we don't keep a lot of them. A lot of them get sold or scrapped. But all I can think about the entire time is how cool it'd be to build essentially a 100 kilowatt array for my house. Do you think you'll get into storage, like, or how far of a leap is it from energy storage for one of your battery management systems or things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, it's never a very big leap. I mean,
Sure.
and kind of Tesla has shown that, right? And but I think, like, for us, it's probably more about the focus of the business and where we want to make the most impact. And I think there is a with all new technologies, there's kind of the entry of the new technology into the market, and then over time it commoditizes, right? And we just kind of have this continual cycle, and we stay away from putting too much time and effort into things that we believe are commoditizing or will commoditize
Sure.
in the near term, because we're a small company in the grand scheme of things. And and I think for us to continue to grow and create impact and change, we're going to have that focus now. And so I don't see, specific to the question, I don't, we've had a lot of people ask us,
Sure.
and we've done some renders inside homes and garages of our battery packs with some different finishes that look pretty amazing, I think. And so it's not that we haven't wanted to or explored it, but there's only so many things you can do in a day, and it's very frustrating.
100%. Yeah. I just, in the veil of hot rodding, right?
Yeah.
There's so many, like, whether you want an old Nissan Leaf pack, like, because to me, and there's, rightfully so, a lot of people have criticisms that if you don't have a means to recycle some of this stuff efficiently, I mean, I guess you can grind them all up and it'll spit out gold on the other side of it. But maybe you want to use them for as long as possible, going forward. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other. I just was curious. So, because it's interesting.
Well, yeah, and we see a huge use for that, especially from like a sustainability recycling perspective. Is for these packs that maybe not a good long term use from a capacity in a vehicle, or mobility application, where they can kind of retire into stored energy for that. And I think the more batteries that exist in the grid stabilizes the grid. And we're not experts in that area, but we are huge fans of that. And so I think it's a good consideration to have, even like, can you take all these packs and move them into the next thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. If I may, because I know even for us, it's a sensitive topic. From a defense perspective, I'm, at least me personally, very interested to see how interested and where more specifically, like, some of our customers are interested in applying that technology. So if you can speak to it, is there some areas where, obviously moving a vehicle and things of that nature, but that you're seeing that's unique, maybe in the application of, like, some of the pillars of your technology and what you offer, like, on the defense side of things?
Yeah, I think it's like one of the greatest values that we can provide defense right now is really just access. And we helped in one program that the company had been working for almost 4 years to deliver on a promise of a hybrid system, and struggled over that 4-year period of time, and they kind of they were just looking for a real solution, and there's so many. I think for a lot of these companies, they get into it, and sometimes they source components and they buy motors and inverters, and they do, and they just, putting it all together takes real knowledge and expertise, and doing it well, especially in a defense application, is not a trivial exercise at all. And so, we've given them access, and, Hypercraft is considered a dual use technology company. So we supply, our commercial products to defense and DoD applications. And, for those that are involved or understand defense, they'll know what that means. But, we like taking things that we have and finding ways to integrate them into defense programs. And so the SXV, which is a special operations vehicle, where there was a small amount of electric only range that they wanted. We were able to come in and have, great success with them, and there's an ongoing long-term relationship there. And, you know, it's cool to see how the technology can be used to keep people safe and save lives, within the military. And that's, we're passionate about that. I think it's so. The innovation thing is coming, for us. There's so much, again, our focus being power management and processing, vehicle processing and networking, and leveraging the benefits of software to
Sure.
kind of redefine the vehicle. Like, that's happening in defense for us big time.
Yeah. I mean, just with everything that's going on, mobility now is more important than ever. And I feel like having the ability to store, generate power, and run things off of power and move quickly and continuously is very important. Like the conversations, I'm in the Guard as well, but the conversations that we're having about completely upturning doctrine, that we've, the United States likes violence of action. We're very, move forward, push forward, we're fast. And there's we might do that, but in a completely different manner now because of what has happened in the world. And I see a lot of reliance on mobility, and none of our systems, everything runs on power. The computers, there's talks and things that are tactical operation centers you'll see in like movies, right? They're not as glamorous as like Transformers or something like that, but there's half the screens that you might see there, right? Which is a legitimate place depending on what level or echelon that you're at. And all that's been called into question for survivability's sake. And I see maybe a lot of that cross-loading into vehicles and things being mobile and interconnected, and to increase, survivability and just maintain inertia, right? And constantly move. So I was just kind of curious. It's interesting. It's an interesting space because I think a lot of people have been asking the defense industry to electrify in a very conventional sense. Like, why don't we have an electric tank? You're like, oh, it weighs 60 tons. So it could be really fast over a real short range, but I don't think you're asking, the right questions with respect to leveraging this technologies. So
Yeah, and to your point, power is so important, and there's so many things that are battery powered now that are used within the military. And so, going to an electric hybrid, tank where, that tank can provide, outsource power to power, many of the things that operate around it, is something that the military has found strategically very important. And so, it's one of the spaces that we operate in almost exclusively hybrid, configuration. And things will happen over time, that change and evolve. But, it's funny. I think I've always believed that electrification as a powertrain technology has kind of taken away from the focus of the true disruption, which is the advanced vehicle processing and the way we manage power,
right.
mobile power, and how we move things. And the software defined vehicle platform is really where most of the disruption is happening. And that's why we believe firmly in this kind of, wide portfolio of powertrain technologies that make up the future, very distributed in that sense and not dominated by one or another. And so it makes it exciting and challenging all at the same time.
Sure. No. So Jake, I'd love to talk for hours, but we're almost at an hour, and I want to respect your time. So if there's anything else you kind of like to talk about, I mean, you kind of have we've talked about some of the pillars of the business, and things that you guys are doing, from connectivity to batteries, powertrains. Is there anything else you maybe wanted to touch on?
Nothing specific. I mean, we love having these conversations. We're really passionate. We want, we want people to feel like they have greater access to it, and not to be, pushed away. So I think to kind of the greater audience, whether you're industry or you're, a passionate consumer, there's companies like us that are just kind of willing and ready to help support, and we don't want people to feel discouraged from reaching out and helping. And maybe we're not a great fit, but Legacy EV is a great company, and Cascading Motion is a great company, and there's all, outside of the tier 1 OEMs, there are great companies out there that are participating in this and doing good things. So we just want to encourage everybody to be curious, and ask questions and reach out.
All right. No, cool. Thanks again. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. I'd love to do it again in the future if you have time. We want to talk about something else, but
absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. Again, I really appreciate it. So
thanks for the opportunity. It was great talking to you.
Yep. Thanks.